Hello all, quick note, sorry if there is background noise, I have a hectic week ahead and today's the only day I can record this and it's torrential rain outside, so there may be some background noise. Last part, we wrapped up the Klingon introductory missions from the point of view of Lieutenant Commander Roka, Conrad Law of the Klingon Defense Force, and prevented an invasion of Vekiri. The beasts are not gone forever, however, and occasionally resurface here and there, before the second wave of them are awakened in the Gamma Quadrant at the end of 2410. If we were to continue down the Klingon storyline missions, from here we would see Roka assigned to the fledgling Romulan Republic as she began to investigate their vanishing of their people and helping them build up Morihan. Ultimately, this would follow the same narrative as the Federation side playthrough, exposing the involvement of the Tal Shiar, the Alachi, and then the shadowy hints at a greater power behind it all, the Iconians. The only real difference is that, for the most part, you end up reporting to a KDF mission handler where relevant, but even that becomes less and less apparent as you proceed through the storyline. We've already seen in the main story quests that the Klingon Federation war doesn't so much end with a decisive victory for one side, thankfully, but sort of fades to a ceasefire. The two sides gradually realise there is more going on. Starfleet finds that the Undine threat was real, and both sides begin to aid the Romulan Republic. Following this, there are even a series of joint missions carried out, with the Republic as a sort of mediating power, that begin to unveil the Iconians, and when the Delta Quadrant opens up again, only then is an official alliance called into play through the Genolan Accords, called the Delta Alliance. This partners the Republic, the KDF and Starfleet together into a joint force to rally the Delta Quadrant for the upcoming conflict, and any Klingon Federation hostilities are ended in full, with the wealth of technology up for grabs from the Dyson Sphere and the looming threat of the Demons of Air and Darkness. At the eve of the Iconian invasion, the Delta Alliance is officially ratified into a more formal alliance between these three powers in order to stand against the threats, and just in time too. However, at the close of the Iconian War, it's worth pointing out that tensions re-emerged concerning the re-entry of the Dominion onto the galactic map. The Klingons in particular, those who followed Jumpok mostly, resented the idea of aiding the Dominion, and it took a great amount of wrangling from supporters such as Martok to convince the KDF to help. This shows that there is still cracks in the alliance, hopefully not big enough to cause issues, but something else is needed. So it is that plans were set for a new and more permanent union between the KDF and the Federation, a true Khitomer Alliance. A few months of relative peace have settled over the galaxy as societies rebuild in the wake of the war, and for the most part things have been going well as the calendar ticks over to the new year of 2411. So, what has been happening in the quadrants in the meantime? Well, a lot of these stories can be found in the lore blogs. For example, Dr. Bashir returned to active duty and took a position aboard the USS Aventine, working alongside his wife, Captain Dax, and Kumarki. He continues to look into the effects of the Ketracel on the Herc, as he promised, and his leads seem to take him to investigating the fungal nature of the original progenitor of Ketracel, which was a type of mushroom. On top of this, he begins to research the Alachi themselves, who are a fungal-based creature, and gets caught up in his research. Literally at one point. After a fall in a cave of Alachi-related mushrooms, Captain Dax informs him that perhaps he should dredge up the works of one officer from the 23rd century, Stanton or something. Yes, she doesn't remember Stamment's name. After looking into it some more, Esri comments how it must have all been a dead end, because if Stammen's theories did work, then, well, we'd all have spore drives by now. Bashir speculates it probably all came to a dead end, but speculates the work may still have merit, and continues to delve. Drawn by the idea that there may be a collective consciousness to the mycelial web, or an origin to species like the Alachi, and maybe a better understanding of things like Ketracel White. In another re-emergence from the past, a Klingon archaeologist called Tortoth claims to have found something of vital importance to the Empire. What he unveils at a conference is a fully restored Klingon sarcophagus ship, but his intentions are far from pure. What starts as a reveal of a piece of Klingon history turns into a sales pitch as he reveals orders for modified replicas of the vessel using its prestige during the Klingon War of 2256-7 and its even earlier ties to ancient Kronos to secure sales. Meanwhile, Starfleet Yard 39, originally a construction dock used back in the early mid-23rd century, was finally freed from baryonic radiation. Back in 2259, the local star had contaminated the system and it was hastily evacuated. As a result, there were many unfinished ships left there, and in the wake of those losses sustained by more recent wars, Starfleet sends out a reclamation team. They managed to salvage a great number of these vessels, many of which are still mid-construction, altering the designs to accommodate contemporary materials, leading to a new wave of Starfleet vessels built atop older frames, such as the USS Europa, USS Gagarin and USS Shran, and many other ships. Suffice to say, Starfleet has finally had a chance to catch its breath and begin to rebuild in earnest. They also go into great detail explaining the difference between cylindrical nacelles and square ones, citing that the Archer-Cochrane-style cores preferred cylindrical nacelles to shape the warp bubble because they were more conservative, while the square Eves-Bayer cores were built with the larger square nacelles. These square nacelles didn't catch on as much because of things like the Klingon War destroying a lot of Federation ships that had them. Meanwhile, on New Romulus, the planet is rebuilding too. There is a rather more dour mood for a while. After all, their capital city was only just completed before the Iconians hit it, so most are understandably salty about that. Fortunately, they still had much of that construction gear left over, so they got right on that. What has been the bigger challenge for the Republic was establishing its own lines of trade and supply amid its relatively small amount of colonies, but they have seen much aid in bolstering from former Star Empire defectors. It seems that after the Iconian War and the voluntary incarceration of Empress Seela, many in the Empire finally joined the 25th century and stopped trying to be conquerors of the Ashes. In fact, it's estimated that 65% of the formerly hostile Star Empire has abandoned it for the Republic. Those who do stay behind end up scrapping over the power vacuum left by Hakiv's death and Seela's imprisonment. The Republic's biggest gain, however, has been their continued possession of the Solanae Dyson Sphere, which they have continued to explore and adapt to their own use, more so than the UFP or the KDF. They even managed to get the Sphere's factories up and running, churning out new Romulan vessels. However, the supplies of the Solanae are not compatible with Romulan designs, so they still seek to establish trade with the other powers who can supply them. For the most part, though, the Republic is growing again, even after losing as much as it did in the Iconian War. With all these new ships being constructed, there is a sense of cooperation in the air that the Federation is keen to capitalise on, and it amps up the Allied Cooperative Starship Development Board. It reaches out to the Republic too, and even the Dominion Vanguard fleet for cooperation in designing new ships for a new proposed navy. An official statement from Vice Admiral S. J. Hempbill was given concerning these efforts. Quote, "The events of the past few years have shown us all that the only way forward is one in which we are all determined to identify that which makes us different from one another and to learn from it, to understand it and to appreciate it. We must see these differences as a source of strength, for that is truly what they are. I am privileged to welcome my colleagues from the Republic Navy and Vanguard Fleet onto the ACSDB, and I am resolute in my commitment to bring the technological expertise of all its members to bear. We must use this experience to address the challenges that we face as a common interest. Together we can leverage our unique perspectives and build the tools, systems and ships that we need to continue forward into the final frontier." So, a joint shipbuilding endeavour, the sharing of resources and the establishing of a stronger tie into this Khitomer Alliance all mark for a more unified future ahead, it seems. A new emblem is created to identify this alliance, the twin delta reminiscent of the Klingons' emblem, and what's more, a further announcement, the formation of the Allied Fleet Service. This will be a joint navy, recruiting volunteers from Starfleet, the Republic Navy and the Klingon Defence Force into a single unified force. Technically, this organisation is made up of individuals who will retain their rank and position in their original organisation, and although the Dominion is not a member in full, it will lend its support to this endeavour too. The AFS, as it is known, answers to 3 leaders initially, although the hope is to grow it further and missions are assigned to its members through them answering to their governments. It's an experiment, to be sure, but an inevitable step based on the year-long cooperation that recent skirmishes have created. It doesn't seek to replace Starfleet or the KDF or any other power, but instead serve as an example of how things could be. It might not work out, it may all collapse under the next bit of infighting, answerable as it is to 3 separate powers, but the hope is that the Khitomer Alliance will hold, and the Allied fleet can serve as its representatives amid the others. So with one eye on the future, the early months of 2411 are promising, and a general reprieve from the Long War as it comes to be called. It's the first time the galaxy has had time to catch its breath, but the Klingons in particular do not do well in times of peace, certainly not individuals who are forged in war like Jumpok. Soon arrivals from the past begin to plague the Empire, and threaten to destabilise all that we've been working towards, but to investigate this fully, we're going to need to go back to Hale's past. So, next up we'll be exploring the Age of Discovery from the initial missions, set back in 2256 from the points of view of a young, fresh out of the academy cadet Hale, before returning to the present to pick up after the time jump because Hale's not the only one to be displaced in time. Hey, in the spirit of Star Trek Discovery, I thought I'd jam in a prequel and try to make it fit with a hammer. But seriously, I planned this back when I began the series, setting Hale's age as 36 when he started in 2270. So he graduated in 2256 at the age of 22 after enlisting in Starfleet at 18. Which jives with the Age of Discovery intro missions. Any discrepancies I'm just going to chalk up to the temporal cover-up installed by Agent Daniels after Hale was brought to the 25th century. Yes, I am poking fun at the loose cover-up explanations given in Discovery, but I thought it would be a fun way to address this content too. So, thanks for watching this recap and prep for the next episode of Star Trek Online. Sorry it's a bit of a shorter one, but this is all stuff I wanted to get out of the way, including lore blog content, and it would just be too much to fit into the opening episode of the Age of Discovery arc, which is what's coming next. So, I've been Rick. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you back for the next part as we continue to explore the ever-retconning narrative of Star Trek Online, and until then, goodbye.